Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Friday, the 6th of July, 2012. I'm Jim Ninsel, host of Political Roundtable, our weekly analysis and commentary on local, state, and national politics. Tonight on the Roundtable, we'll look at a report that confirms that Tucson City Councilman Paul Cunningham sexually harassed 2 city employees and unpack a plan by TUSD to close some schools in order to build new ones. We'll also look ahead at the top races of 2012. Joining me this evening is Democratic Party Chairman Jeff Rogers, Pima County Republican Party Chairwoman Carolyn Cox, and former state lawmaker Pete Hirschberger. Welcome, and thanks to all of you for being here. Jeff, let's start with the city investigation into Councilman Paul Cunningham's behavior on this trip to San Diego. The report confirms that Mr. Cunningham got very intoxicated and then apparently approached a few female staffers and said some pretty offensive things to them.
Well, I think we didn't learn a whole lot new from the investigation that wasn't already out there. We did learn a couple things. One was that that these women said that they stuck around Paul because they wanted to protect other people from being bothered by Paul. And number two, we found that maybe there was a prior incident where he had behaved somewhat similarly. So I think Paul has come out and said that he has an alcohol problem. He's in treatment and trying to resolve that. That doesn't forgive what he did, certainly. And I applaud the city for taking this matter very seriously. There aren't a lot of things that can happen to him because the city charter says that he can be fined $50. Is about all they can do. So it's really probably incumbent upon our council and mayor to come up with some sort of code of conduct. But there's really no other resolution of it other than we just hope Paul takes care of the problems that he's got.
And Carolyn, on this program previously, you said that you think it's good that he's seeking help for his drinking problem. Do you think this has a political impact on him? He doesn't have to run for re-election again until 2015.
Well, it depends on whether he stays clean and sober. And if he does, he'll be fine. And if he doesn't, I think the city council ought to ask him to resign because obviously he has a problem and it just should not be, it should not be permitted to continue.
Pete, you make anything of all of this?
Well, no one can condone what he did, but in light of that, he has taken responsibility for what he did, and he's seeking help. I think he's on a very short string. I agree. Yeah. And then if there are any further occurrences, then I think it's time for him to go. But he's going to move forward, and I expect that he will take care of this problem now.
Okay. Carolyn, the Tucson Unified School District is now looking at a plan proposed by the superintendent, John Petticone, to look at possibly closing a lot of the smaller schools in the district and building new ones in order to have what he calls optimized schools and presumably with better technology and more attractive to students and parents. What are your thoughts? Do you think the voters have an appetite to pass a bond to pay for this?
You know, I think the voters are really sick and tired of the emphasis being placed on money. We need this, we need that for the school and that kind of thing. I think the real problem is that we need to rethink how the teachers are conducting the classes. I just think that we have examples where real learning takes place, and it happens mostly in schools like basis schools, the charter schools, the private schools, homeschooling, that kind of thing. And I really do think it's time for public education to rethink how they are motivating children in the schools. And I don't think the voters are going to approve a whole bunch more money.
Pete, what do you think of this and education funding in the state in general? You're familiar from your days as a state lawmaker.
Yes, I think moving forward, we have to look at how we're going to serve our population in our public schools, and charter schools are public schools.
Right.
I think it's appropriate to study this and to look at it. It's going to be a hard sell to ask the voters to vote for more money for schools, but we need the technology, and we need schools that meet the needs of the children today. It's unfortunate that the state has failed in its responsibility to fund public education, and I would hope that the voters would continue to hold legislators accountable for that funding.
And Jeff, is campaign issue in these TUSD races, you think?
I think it could come up as a campaign issue, but I just don't. I think it's a non-starter. Right now, in these difficult times, we do need to better fund public education. And as we did when people like Peter were in the state legislature, we took it a lot more seriously. And the funding is way beneath what it needs to be for adequate public instruction. But, buildings don't teach, teachers teach. And so we need to focus upon the quality teachers and on funding our education properly. And one of the other things that's always been a problem with TUSD, it remains so as of today, is that it's one of the sort of fatter bureaucratic school districts in the state, and always has been. There's been too much middle management there, not enough focus on what really goes into the classrooms, so I think that's an area that needs to be focused on, and I think that voters are not going to approve a bond issue to build buildings when we have too many buildings already. We're having to close down schools and move populations elsewhere. So how can you then ask them to close down even more of them and build new schools? I think it's probably better that we spend the money revitalizing the schools that we have and making them more technology friendly.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about some of the big races that we have coming up this year, and we'll start with the U.S. Senate race, which pits, as a primary race, that pits Congressman Jeff Flake against newcomer to politics Will Cardin, who's spending millions of dollars of his own money on these TV ads and seems to be picking up a little bit in the polls as a result. Pete, how do you read this one?
I think Jeff Flake is going to win this, but the question is how much damage is Will Cardin going to do? He's got an awful lot of money. You're seeing his signs all across the state. You're seeing him on TV all the time. This could be closer than we expect, but I think Jeff Flake will win that race.
Carolyn, you?
I think the primary is actually a very, very good thing for Jeff, because for many years he's never really had to campaign very hard, and I think this is a good experience for him to be put up against someone like this, because it will prepare him for when he runs against the Democrat.
Jeff, do you think Flake has something to worry about here?
I think he's got a little bit to worry about. I would concur with that Flake will probably emerge, but Cardin he's saturating the Phoenix market with advertising, television advertising, and I understand that Flake just made a $1.5 million television advertising buy during this past week as well. So you're going to see a quite active campaign there, and he's also taking a real chunk out of Flake's credibility. I mean, calling him a professional politician lobbyist who's never created a job. And then, of course, Flake's answer was, well, I did work in private industry when I was a lobbyist for the South African firm, which was partially owned by an Iranian firm. So, he's just at every turn, I think he's getting a chunk of flesh taken out of him, and should he emerge, he's going to be a less viable candidate. And of course, we're pleased to see that.
Because the winner of this race will face Richard Carmona, the independent turned Democrat, former Surgeon General and SWAT team member who is making his first foray into electoral politics. And we've seen various polls on this race. Some of them have shown a close race, and I think others have shown Flake with a really significant lead. How do you see this one shaping up?
When I look at those polls, I look down deeper into the polls, and what I see is of the people who know who Richard Carmona is and know something about him, he's beating Flake by a wide margin in those parts of the polls. So his goal now is to get out there and introduce himself to the people of Arizona, because once they know him, they like him, and I think that he'll probably prevail. I think this is probably the most excited I've been for a Democratic Senate candidate in the 33 years that I've been here.
Carolyn, your take on general election matchup between Congressman Flake and Richard Carmona?
Well, as I said, I think the campaign in the primary will be good for Jeff. I think it will make him stronger. I think he's been a very, very strong fiscal conservative, and I think that's what people are looking for. I think Richard Carmona has been a lot of things, between a Democrat, a Republican, worked for a Republican president, and I think he's struggling to find out who he is. And I think Jeff will prevail.
Pete, how do you handicap this race?
I think both are very good candidates, Flake and Carmona, and I think it'll be a very close race. Richard Carmona is a very credible candidate. He has the best resume in the country to be in the United States Senate, and so I think it'll be very close, and nobody should take Carmona for granted.
I think the TV stations are probably going to be really happy about all these Senate races. Let's talk about our local congressional races. Ron Barber, this last week cast a vote where he crossed party lines in order to give Congress the permission to get more information from the White House, go to a judge to see if they can get more information from the White House about the Fast and Furious investigation. I talked with Congressman Barber about that last week, and he said that basically he felt like it was the proper step to go to court, and he said that it's been mischaracterized as a contempt of Congress vote. Your thoughts on what Ron's saying there?
Well, I don't think there's anything, as I've said about this Fast and Furious investigation, there's no there. There's just nothing to it. As we talked about last week, there's a fascinating Fortune article that really shows that it was a battle between the ATF agents who wanted to hold people responsible for what happened and the prosecutors who said that we don't have the appropriate laws to do that. I probably would not have voted as Ron Barber did, given the circumstances of that. It's really nothing more than a witch hunt. But it's unfair to judge Ron by this one single vote or any one or two votes. Normally a congressperson is in there for 2 full years, and you get to see a whole panoply of what they do. And I'm sure that if we look back at Gabrielle Gifford's voting record, there's a few things I didn't agree with back in her voting record, but I look at a whole 2-year period and say, all in all, she was a wonderful congresswoman, during both of her terms. So I think it's unfair to hold his feet too far to the fire, like some Democrats are, for just this one vote or for the other vote about the environmental issues.
But does this open up an opportunity for Representative Matt Hines, who's challenging him in the primary, to actually pick up his campaign a little bit?
I think it does. I don't think he had any traction at all before that, and I think this gives him a little bit of a window. But you must understand that Ron has a superior organization, superior fundraising operation, and he just is probably going to be, way too strong of a candidate for anyone else to really take him on seriously. And I think this is Ron's race to lose, basically, as is the fall race against McSally.
And Carolyn, were you surprised by these couple of votes that Ron Barber has taken? I know the Republicans said he would be a rubber stamp for the Obama administration, and apparently he's determined to kind of take a few votes, at least, that suggest that he's not.
Well, I loved his vote on the border because, as I said to Jeff last week, that the last time I was here, that the border certainly is not pristine, and it's terrible, the amount of not just the trafficking that's coming across, but there are some really bad people who are coming in here, terrorist-type people that we are not catching. And so I think it's very, very necessary for our Border Patrol to be motorized and to be able to drive along that border and apprehend people. And so, I'm delighted with both of his votes, because I think the Fast and Furious thing, essentially what it did was kill an American and a whole bunch of Mexicans that we don't even know about. And it was a terribly bad idea because they were not tracing the guns. There was actually no reason to have done any of this. So I'm glad that the Congress is asking for more information on the Fast and Furious.
And Pete, you crossed party lines to support Ron Barber, and what do you think about how he's done so far?
First of all, if you look at the Fast and Furious issue, I would encourage our viewers to read the Fortune magazine article on it. It's a long read, but it's very informative and talks about the real issues of Fast and Furious. Therefore, the one vote on contempt that Ron Barber voted no on was the appropriate vote. What's happening in the
criminal
House of
contempt?
Yes. What's happening in the House of Representatives is a political witch hunt, and that was an appropriate vote to vote no on that.
And it appears as though the likely Republican candidate in this race in the fall is Martha McSally. She has some token opposition in the primary here. But how do you see a McSally-Barber race shaping up if Ron Barber is actually the nominee?
Well, I understand that McSally, obviously she's not as well known as Ron. It would have been certainly good had she have won the CDA primary or election, but she didn't. And I see her as a strong candidate, somebody who has a lot of energy and enthusiasm. I think that we absolutely need to put some more Republicans in. I think we have a need for a fiscally conservative representative in that seat, and I think she fits the bill.
The district has gotten a little harder for a Republican to win under redistricting. You've got a much more even split between Democrats and Republicans in this district.
But there's a difference between a fiscal conservative and a social conservative, and I think Martha has a very good chance.
Jeff,
well, I didn't see her distinguish herself from the other candidates in the CD8 primary. I mean, it just kind of seemed like she might be a kinder, gentler version of Jesse Kelly. I didn't see her substantively disagree with Kelly and the other candidates on any issues whatsoever. And in fact, in her introduction to the public, she sort of introduced herself as appealing to a extremely conservative sort of fundamentalist Christian sort of base. And that was sort of how she came out with her announcement. I'd like to hear a little bit about how she feels about a woman's right to choose, how she feels about equal rights for gays and lesbians. I'd like to hear what she thinks about many of the issues of the day, but she has been pretty quiet about those things. And I know in one of your articles you tried to pin her down about some of these subjects, and she really wasn't very helpful.
So we'll see how far out she gets on some of these issues as the campaign continues. But Pete, you're sticking with Ron Barber?
Absolutely, enthusiastically so. And Ron has shown himself to be his own man, not a rubber stamp, as evidenced by the votes we've talked about.
And we have a new congressional district here in southern Arizona, Congressional District 1, which includes some of this Congressional District 8, which has been broken up that we've just been talking about, the northwest side, the Saddlebrook, Oro Valley, and parts of Marana, and it's now actually goes over eastern Arizona and all the way up to Flagstaff and the Hopi and Navajo reservations, a very large district out there. On the Republican side, we have former state lawmaker Jonathan Payton running in this race, along with some other political newcomers, a guy named Gaither Martin, a contractor named Doug Wade, another fellow out there in rural Arizona. Carolyn, can you tell us something about some of these candidates and how you see this one shaping up?
Well, actually, I am absolutely very much enthusiastic about Jonathan Payton's chances on this. And as he has pointed out, Ms. Kirkpatrick is the one who initially voted for Obamacare in the initial vote. And this is actually going to be the largest tax on the American people that has ever happened. There are 21 taxes included in the Obamacare bill. I think it is an absolute disaster would be an absolute disaster to our country if it's not repealed. And so I'm very much backing our candidate. I think Jonathan has the experience and the ability to bring that about. But I just think people do not understand the lack of, that they're losing privacy between themselves and their doctor with the kind of reporting requirements that Obamacare requires. I think the thing about businesses having to report people's the premiums that they pay for their insurance is just another way for the control that this administration wants over people, the lack of freedom, the lack of choices that they have. And so I'm very, very concerned about that, and I'm very much in favor of Jonathan Payton.
And Pete, you served with Jonathan up at the legislature. You probably don't know some of these other candidates, but you do know that area fairly well. Do you have any sense of how this one's shaping up?
I served with both Ann Kirkpatrick and Jonathan Payton. I expect both of them will win their primaries, and I will support Ann Kirkpatrick. She is about the issues. Jonathan is about Jonathan. There's a clear distinction there. Much of the district that comes into Pima County was in my District 26, so I know that area very well. Jonathan's issue is to win that by a large margin. He doesn't live there. I don't know that he can do that.
And Jeff, the Democrats are already doing their part to try to bring Jonathan Payton down in this primary and probably weaken him as well for the general with the return of your Payday Payton website.
Right. Well, I don't think that a former payday loan lobbyist and he by the way has made most of his income from lobbying ever since he lost the last race he ran in. So I just don't think that's going to appeal to the people of eastern Arizona. He's seen already as a carpetbagger. He doesn't live in the district, lives on the east side of Tucson. He's, to my knowledge, never lived in that district, has no familiarity with the rural district as it winds around the eastern side all the way up to Flagstaff. Ann Kirkpatrick knows that district very well. She represented it for 2 years in Congress. who represented part of that district when she was in the state legislature. She's shown herself to be a moderate and a fiscally conservative Democrat that probably appeals quite well to that kind of populace. So I fully expect her to, mostly because of the name ID and her huge money advantage, to win her primary, probably by a large margin. The polling data I've seen recently shows that she's way ahead in the primary. So I think she'll get through that easily, and I do think that Jonathan Payton is not well suited for that district.
I just take exception to the fact that she is a fiscal conservative. No fiscal conservative could have voted for a bill, number one, that nobody had read. Nobody knew what was in it. And now that we know that it is just a
Carolyn,
huge
the Congressional Budget Office has analyzed that bill and says that it will reduce the deficit dramatically over the next 10 years.
No, they have not.
Yes, they have.
No, they have not. In fact,
there have been
they
two
said,
solid analyses of it that show that
absolutely.
It reduces the deficit.
How can you reduce the deficit by
it reduces the deficit significantly.
Adding 150 new agencies?
Everything in that bill is paid for. Everything in that bill is paid for.
Tax increases that you're concerned
about.
The
tax increases
will help reduce the deficit if you raise taxes.
Well, I mean, this president has added over $5 trillion to the national debt and has done it. In the fastest rate.
Now, that's not true either. The deficit increased more dramatically faster under both of the two Bushes and under Reagan than it has under
It increased,
Obama.
But not like
no,
he
it
has
increased
done.
by a larger percentage under all of those places.
100% of our gross domestic product is our debt.
You're entitled to your opinion, but you can't just make up facts.
I did not make that up.
Is that it has increased at a slower rate under President Obama than during Clinton, both Bushes and Reagan.
No.
Well, certainly the Republicans who and the Clinton came before did increase the national debt.
Definitely there was increase in the debt, no question, but nothing as fast as Barack Obama has done. I mean, we even lost our A-rated, our credit rating because of the amount of debt that we have.
Jeff, you mentioned earlier the primary in this race, the CD1 race, and you've already got complaints from Wendy Benalla Baldenegro that the Democrats aren't playing fair in this race.
Right. Well, I think that when we have an incumbent or something that's almost like a pseudo-incumbent like Ann Kirkpatrick, the party has kind of rallied around her because she just is probably the best chance we have to win that race. And I really do like Winona a lot. I have a lot of respect for her and consider her a rising star, but I just don't think that this is her year. And at some other point in time, I think she will present a wonderful new face for the party. But I just think Ann Kirkpatrick has huge advantages, and so it's hard to deny that everyone has kind of rallied around Ann and her campaign.
And we have some local races coming up. Particular of interest to me, I have a cover story out in the Tucson Weekly this week for the Pima County Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Ann Day is stepping down. We have 4 Republicans in the race there to try to replace her, and the winner will go on to face Democrat Nancy Young-Wright, a former state lawmaker. Pete, how do you see this one shaping up? You've got state lawmaker Vic Williams. You've got Mike Helen, who's a former national committeeman. You've got Allie Miller with the Tea Party, and Stuart McDaniel, who's connected well with conservatives in the party. What's your sense of how this one's forming?
I don't know. This is really amazing. I don't know. I would think that Vic Williams has name recognition, but Mike Helen does as well. I think Vic Williams has put an enormous amount of money, $125,000, into his own campaign, his own personal money, and I think that gives him a tremendous advantage, depending upon how he spends that money. So, but I don't know. I think you would look at Mike Helen and possibly Vic Williams.
And Carolyn, any sense of how this one's shaping up?
Well, like he said, there are 4 good candidates. They're all working very hard. I think Allie Miller has been working for a long time in this. Stuart McDaniel has been around talking to all of the business leaders. And as you and I talked about a little bit earlier on the idea of the county and the city and the cooperation, we have a real problem at the corner of Craycroft and River. If this annexation takes place, there's going to be a huge impact financially on either the city or the county, whoever is going to have to widen the road, to widen River Road, whoever is going to have to shore up the riverbank. And I have a letter here, as I have shown you, from Chuck Huckleberry to the mayor saying that we need to stop this annexation until we figure out how we can accomplish these things. So I would like to see
this is an issue where the city's looking at annexing the area, River and Craycroft, and there's a developer there who owns some property who wants to build a hotel and some other stuff on that area, and there's concerns that the infrastructure is not prepared for that.
Right, that the traffic report is being ignored, that the environmental report from the Corps of Engineers is being ignored, and that it's going to if the developer is not required to do these things, it's going to be big expense to taxpayers in either the city or the county, depending on where all this ends up.
And that's coming up next week at the City Council.
The
Okay.
10th of
Jeff, on the back to the District 1 race, what about Nancy Young-Wright? You think she has a shot at
I think she has an enormous shot. The only candidate that concerns me a little bit would be Mike Helen, but if any of the others win, I think Nancy wins that race for sure. I think she can run a close, tight race with Mike, but Mike is a real gentleman and the kind of Republican that Ann Day was, and I think we ought to all thank Ann Day for all of her years of service. She represents me in that district, and I think she's done a wonderful, fine job, and I think we really ought not lose sight of the wonderful service she's given to this county in those many years. But, Nancy Young-Wright spent 10 years on the school board of Amphi, which is in that district. She spent 3 years in the state legislature. She's shown herself to be somebody who can work across the aisle with everyone, and I think that she presents a fine alternative for us there. And she outraised every one of these candidates in a number of donors. She had more total donors than all of the candidates put together, the other 4 Republicans, and she raised more money than each of them individually, except, of course, for Vic Williams, who spent $125,000 of his own money to try to get elected. He doesn't seem to have much support outside of his own bank account so far, but we'll see.
We're going to have to leave it there, but I'm sure we'll be talking about these races more as time goes by. You can learn more about what's happening in politics by visiting azpm.org/yourvote. And while you're on our website, we'd love to hear your thoughts about tonight's program, so be sure to leave us a comment. And to find out the latest from AZPM, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Stay tuned next for the News Hour, and then at 8:30, tune into Arizona Week for a look at the many propositions that voters will face this November. I'm Jim Ninsel. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.